Samoa already Samoa no twice to know we turn on New Zealand, but if you feel any time of the time, Alpha just mainly film on the Palmia or Malo New Zealand, on Paul Chris Hipkins, Elitara Baclame, Talanoid is buying a while of foil to Penatum Molfanga Palota, New Zealand, less of Sumal Far, Masino. Topa. Honorable Chris Hipkins, thank you so much, Talo Falava, and good morning. How are you, sir?
Lover, I'm great, thank you.
Okay, good to have you here on Radio Samoa, and thank you for making your time available to be with us this morning. First of all, Mr. Hipkins, the latest poll released last night, 26.5 for Labour, which is very low. I mean, all the polls last night and last few weeks, Labour's numbers are not looking good for Labour. Is it a worrying time for you and the government?
The polls show that National and Active peaked and their numbers are coming back down again. My job in the next 3 weeks is to make sure that people come back to Labour and that we get them to vote for us. Nobody's voted yet. Voting's we've still got a wee way to go before people make their way to the polling booth. And my goal is to make sure that when people do, they know what's at stake. I think people are seeing that National's numbers don't add up. They're seeing that a National Act New Zealand First government would be cutting a lot of things that New Zealanders support and that they rely on, and that there's a lot at risk at this election. So I think we can turn those numbers around.
How can you do that, Mr. Hipkins?
Well, we're going to be campaigning vigorously. We're out there on the doorsteps, on the phones. And the other thing that we've got to really make sure is that people turn out to vote. Those polls will account for, the fact that there's a lot of expectation that our Pacific communities don't actually vote in large number. I think we can change that. I think we can actually get a large number of Pacific voters out to vote.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Hipkins, quite a few announcements by the government last week. One particular announcement was about the dawn raids amnesty. Why it took so long for the government to announce this amnesty, please, Mr. Hipkins?
When we made the apology for the dawn raids, we said that we were going to kick off a program of work around that, and that included things like scholarships, it included righting some of the wrongs of the past, and we indicated then that we were going to look at an amnesty for overstayers to make sure they could regularise their immigration status, and that's what I announced over the weekend. We've got to follow through on that commitment. I would have liked to have done it earlier in the year. There were a few things got in the way. We had a change of Minister of Immigration and so on. But this has been something that we've been working on since we made that apology for the dawn raids.
Yeah. In regards of this dawn raids amnesty, Mr. Hipkins, why are you going back to 10 years for those overstaying in New Zealand? How about those who were overstaying in New Zealand more than 10 years, please?
So this is for everybody who's been in New Zealand for longer than 10 years, so who've been overstaying for longer than 10 years. So it's not designed to capture people who are more recent. For those who are more recent overstayers, if they've got a genuine sort of humanitarian case, then they can make that on an individual basis to the minister. This really is about those who are well settled in New Zealand. If we think about some of the descendants of people who were, victims of the dawn raids, for example, and went into hiding during that period. Some of the young people now are finding that there are flow-on consequences for them. They're not able to access education and so on. So we want to fix that wrong of the past.
It says that you will only do this if you're going to come back in the government, meaning you will win the general election on the 14th of October. What happens if you don't?
If Labour doesn't win the election, then it doesn't happen. So the National Party have been clear that they won't do it. So the only way to guarantee that it will happen is to make sure that you vote Labour.
So going back to the dawn raids apology 2 years ago, that means the government Labour government is not doing anything at all.
Oh, no, absolutely not. We've been doing a lot to, make sure that we follow through on the commitments that we made. I think about the work that we've done around schools, for example, so that our kids can learn about the history of the dawn raids in schools. Because if we want to avoid these things happening again in the future, then making sure that there is understanding. I think about the work that we've been doing to document the history of the dawn raids, including, through our artistic community, to make sure that we don't forget that period of New Zealand's history, because that's how we can avoid it being repeated. Things like the scholarships, again, which are designed to make sure that we deal with the intergenerational issues that have been created by the dawn raids.
Mr. Hipkins, the other issues that will be the key factors in this coming up election coming up, cost of living and climate change. Are you doing enough for climate change for this particular issue, please?
Yesterday, we set out our climate change manifesto. It's one of the most ambitious plans to tackle climate change that New Zealand has seen. We've got to get our emissions down. We're investing in the things that are going to do that. Things like, decarbonising, reducing the emissions from our big industry. Those are things that will make a big difference to our emissions. Making sure that New Zealanders are supported to, make decisions like transitioning to lower emissions vehicles, for example, so they get a more fuel efficient car or even an electric car. Supporting Kiwis to be able to do that. So there's an awful lot at stake at this election. But actually, the climate is one of the things that's at stake. A National Act New Zealand First government wouldn't be tackling climate change. In fact, between them, they want to reverse almost every measure that we've put in place that's really making a difference.
And you're blaming the opposition national that they're not doing anything to help this. Are you able to elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, so National have said that they'd reverse the clean car discount, which is, the clean car discount means we've got one of the highest uptakes of electric vehicles in the world. They've said that they'll bring back oil and gas exploration, so they'll go back to burning fossil fuels to meet our energy needs. When we've said that actually we think our energy future should be 100% renewable. So National wants to wind the clock back on the things that we've been doing. They've said that agricultural emissions, people have to wait till next decade before they do anything about those.
Okay, Mr. Hipkins, let's talk about health. The numbers in front of me at the moment, 4,800 nurses short, 1,700 GP short, and 1,000 midwives short. National say they will, to tackle this problem, they have to go overseas and find people to come into New Zealand to help with this. What is the Labour going to do with this?
We need to attract talented health professionals from overseas, but we also need to train more of them. So I've set out a plan to significantly increase the number of places that we've got available to train new doctors and to train new nurses, because that's how we're going to actually get out of the workforce shortage that we've got in health. In the meantime, we are actively recruiting international doctors and nurses to come to New Zealand. I know the National Party's plan involves slapping an additional tax on them as they come through the border. Actually, that's not going to get them into the country faster. In fact, it's going to discourage them from coming.
Okay, housing is one of the topics that's been a problem in New Zealand for so many years, Mr. Hipkins. What is Labour's going to do with this, especially our Samoan and Pacific people who are struggling to find houses?
When you're in a housing crisis, you build more houses, and that's what we're focused on doing. So the private sector is currently building between 40 and 50,000 houses a year. That's good because it increases the overall number of houses. But for low-income New Zealanders, we've been really focused on building more state and public houses. So we've built 13,000, or we've added 13,000 so far, and we've committed to double that in the next 4 years, which we believe we can do. So that will add us 27,000 new public homes during the time that we've been in government.
Okay, we found out that most of our Pacific Island people and Māori people are so affected with diseases because of not quality of the houses, no good at all. The houses you were talking about, are they quality houses, Mr. Hipkins?
Yeah, the new houses that we're building are built to a very high standard, but we're also doing more than that. 120,000 New Zealand homes have been retrofitted with insulation and so on, because we know that, many of the diseases, many of the illnesses that we're seeing people arriving in hospital with can be avoided by having warmer, drier homes. So 120,000 homes done so far, upgraded so far, and we've committed to another 100,000, and we've got that underway now.
Okay, let's talk about education, because this is another thing that looking at Pacifica and Maori, they're not having a quality education, Mr. Hipkins. What can the government do with this?
My goal as Minister of Education was to make every school in the country a place where kids couldn't wait to get out of bed and go to in the morning. And that means making schools much more inclusive and much more reflective of the communities that they serve. So I think our Pacific communities should be celebrated. Their culture, language and identity should be celebrated in schools, because that's the thing that's going to really inspire our young people to learn. Yeah.
Okay, finally, last topic here is crime. I mean, severe crime is the problem at the moment. Even though it's coming down, the number is coming down, but severe crime is the main problem at the moment, especially our Pacific and Maori young people. What can you do with this, Mr. Hipkins?
We've got to focus on breaking the cycle of criminal offending, and that means keeping kids out of prison and keeping them out of a life of crime. So we've put in place some programs that are designed to turn these kids' lives around. I'm not willing to write off these young New Zealanders. Many of them are Māori and Pacific New Zealanders, and they can have a really bright future ahead of them if we can get them back on the straight and narrow, and that's exactly what we'll be focused on.
Okay, Mr. Hipkins, before I let you go, our Samoan community are listening, and so is other Pacific Island people listening to Radio Samoa. What is your message to them as we're election looming up on the 14th of October?
There's a lot at stake at this election. If you want a government that's committed to keeping people in jobs and making sure your incomes are growing, that's focused on building more affordable rental houses, that's focused on lifting children out of poverty and investing in our health system and our education system and the infrastructure that we rely on, that's backing our police with record investments in new police and in making sure that they've got the tools that they need to do their job, then a party vote for Labour is the way that you can continue with all of that progress.
Honourable Prime Minister of New Zealand, Chris Hipkins, once again, whawhatai tele lava, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Whawhatai lava. Le whionga le li pale mia o le malo New Zealand, Honourable Chris Hipkins.